There's a lot happening around the Buffalo Bills right now, and some of it has me really paying attention, because this is exactly the time of year when one decision can change the entire picture heading into the season. There are things happening behind the scenes that tell us a lot about how this team is evaluating its roster, who they trust, and who might still have a chance to prove themselves before the real games begin. And honestly, I think there's more to this situation than it looks like at first glance. So stick with me, because we need to talk about what the Bills just did, why they did it, and what it could mean moving forward. And hey, if you're a real Bills fan, hit that like button for me, and subscribe if you haven't already. I'm Sam. This is Bills Nation Update, and we're still a new channel trying to build this community from the ground up. Our first goal is 5,000 subscribers, but I only want you here if you're truly a Bills fan, and you believe this team can finally get to the Super Bowl. If that's you, come be part of the Bills Mafia with us from the very beginning. Buffalo has re-signed safety Ja'Quan Owens, and the timing here is what really caught my attention. Owens was released by the Bills on July 31st, and instead of simply disappearing into the background, he immediately started getting interest from other teams around the league. In fact, Owens worked out for 4 different teams after Buffalo let him go. And now, after all of that, he's back in Buffalo. That tells me something. It tells me the Bills still see something in this player. Mike Garafolo of NFL Network reported that Buffalo brought Owens back. And honestly, when a player gets released, works out for 4 other teams, and then his original team brings him back, you have to wonder what the Bills saw that made them decide, you know what, we need another look at this guy. And I think the answer is pretty simple: opportunity. Owens originally signed with Buffalo as an undrafted free agent in 2025. He was never some highly drafted prospect who was guaranteed a roster spot. He had to fight for everything from the beginning. Unfortunately, an undisclosed injury landed him on injured reserve and ultimately ended his season. The Bills then waived him with an injury designation. So this is really another chapter in his attempt to establish himself in the NFL. And now, seemingly healthy again, Owens gets another chance. But what makes this even more interesting is that Buffalo knew other teams were interested. 4 teams brought him in for workouts after the Bills released him. That means this wasn't just Buffalo randomly deciding to bring back a player nobody else cared about. There was interest. Teams around the NFL were taking a look at him. And Buffalo clearly believes there's enough potential there to bring him back into its own training camp and see what he can do. Now let's talk about where Ja'Quan Owens comes from, because his college career gives us a pretty good idea of why the Bills might still be intrigued by him. Owens spent the first 3 years of his college career at Yale. He appeared in 29 games there and put up 165 tackles, 18 passes defended, and 1 interception. And he wasn't just putting up numbers quietly. Owens was a first-team All-Ivy selection in each of his final 2 seasons at Yale. Then, in 2024, he transferred to New Hampshire for his final 13 games, and once again, he produced, recording 111 tackles, 2 pass breakups, and an interception. So when you look at the overall profile, this is a guy who has demonstrated that he can find the football, make tackles, defend passes, and contribute in different ways. The question isn't whether Ja'Quan Owens has had success at the college level. The question is whether he can translate that into the NFL. And now Buffalo is giving him another opportunity to answer that question. But I want Bills fans to keep one thing in perspective here. Re-signing Owens does not mean he's suddenly guaranteed a spot on the final roster. Not even close. He still has an uphill battle. Training camp is where this gets serious. Owens has to make an impression, and he has to do it quickly. The Bills have a limited number of roster spots, and every player competing at safety is fighting for one of those opportunities. But here's the part I like. At least now, Owens has the opportunity to prove the Bills made a mistake when they released him. Imagine being released, having 4 other teams show enough interest to bring you in for workouts, and then getting the call from Buffalo saying, "Come back, we want to see you again." That's a pretty good second chance. And for a player like Owens, this could be one of those moments where everything changes. Now, let's move to the other big piece of this roster news, because the Bills also made a pretty significant decision at linebacker. Just hours before their first preseason game, Buffalo released veteran linebacker Otis Reese IV. And yeah, that timing is important. The Bills had signed Reese only the previous week after the New England Patriots released him during the summer. He was a late addition to Buffalo's 90-man roster, and the expectation was that he would compete for a reserve linebacker role while also potentially becoming a regular contributor on special teams. Instead, his time in Buffalo is already over. And this isn't even Reese's first connection to the Bills. He spent part of the 2025 season on Buffalo's practice squad, but he never received a call-up to the active roster. The Bills released him in October, and now after bringing him back this summer, they've moved on from him again. So for Otis Reese IV, this is another difficult turn in what has already been a pretty nomadic start to his NFL career. Reese entered the league in 2023 as an undrafted rookie free agent with the Tennessee Titans. Over 2 seasons with Tennessee, he appeared in 20 games and made 5 starts. He also developed a reputation for being versatile and for contributing heavily on special teams. During his NFL career, Reese recorded 38 tackles and 1 interception. According to Sports Illustrated's Jeremy Brenner, Reese had even been given a chance to compete for a starting job on Tennessee's defense during training camp. But the Titans ultimately appeared more comfortable with Cedric Gray and James Williams Sr., who were ahead of him on Tennessee's first unofficial depth chart. And that eventually contributed to Reese losing his place on the roster. Now he's back on the market again. But here's where this gets interesting for the Bills. Even though Buffalo just released Reese, linebacker remains one of the positions where the team could potentially need more help. And that's because the Bills lost a steady starter when Matt Milano hit free agency. So while the Bills have decided that Otis Reese IV isn't the answer right now, that doesn't necessarily mean they're finished addressing the linebacker position. In fact, this could be an area to watch very closely as the preseason continues. And there's already been a name floated as a potential option. Bleacher Report's Christopher Knox suggested that the Bills could potentially bring back former linebacker Tyrel Dodson through a trade with the Miami Dolphins. Now, obviously that's a suggestion, not a guarantee that Buffalo is actually making that trade, but the reasoning is pretty interesting. Miami has undergone a major roster rebuild this offseason, and according to Knox, logical trade chips are relatively limited. That could potentially make Dodson an interesting player to monitor. Tyrel Dodson started all 16 games last season and had a massive statistical year, recording 129 tackles, 5 sacks, and 10 tackles for loss. And here's another thing that makes the idea interesting from a roster-building perspective. Dodson is entering the final year of his contract and carries a cap hit of only $3.7 million. For a team that's tight against the salary cap, that's a pretty attractive number. Knox's argument is basically that if Miami is planning to move away from Dodson over the next year, trading him during the preseason could be a way for the Dolphins to maximize his value. And for Buffalo, if the team decides it needs more experience and production at linebacker, a player like Dodson would obviously be a very familiar option. Remember, this is a guy Bills fans already know, so I can understand why that possibility gets people talking. But at the same time, I don't want us to jump ahead and act like a trade is happening. It isn't. The actual news right now is that Buffalo released Otis Reese IV while simultaneously bringing Ja'Quan Owens back into the fold after Owens had worked out for 4 other teams. Those 2 moves might look unrelated on the surface, but they both show us something about where the Bills are right now. They're evaluating. They're experimenting. They're trying to figure out which players can actually help them when the regular season arrives. And this is exactly why preseason matters more than people sometimes want to admit. For players like Ja'Quan Owens, these games and practices can be everything. One strong performance can change the way a coaching staff sees you. One bad stretch can put you right back on the outside looking in. And for Buffalo, every roster decision matters because this team isn't entering the season with the luxury of ignoring weaknesses. The expectations are enormous. Bills Mafia isn't looking for a team that's simply good enough to make the playoffs. We've seen that story. We want more. We want this team to be good enough when January arrives. We want the Bills to be standing there when the biggest games of the season are being played. And that's why decisions at positions like linebacker and safety matter. You need depth. You need players who can step in when injuries happen. You need special teams contributors. You need young players who can develop into legitimate NFL contributors. And you need to make the right decisions before the regular season exposes your weaknesses for you. That's why I'm actually interested in seeing what Ja'Quan Owens does with this second opportunity. He's not guaranteed anything. He's not a household name. He's not walking into Buffalo with a guaranteed roster spot. but he has already shown enough for 4 other teams to work him out after the Bills released him. And now the Bills themselves have decided they aren't finished evaluating him. That matters. At the same time, the release of Otis Reese IV is a reminder that nothing is guaranteed on this roster. He was brought in, he had a history with Buffalo, he had NFL experience, and he had the versatility to contribute on special teams. And Buffalo still decided to move on before even playing its first preseason game. That's the reality of this business. The Bills are looking for the best combination of talent, fit, versatility, health, and future potential. And sometimes that means giving one player another chance while closing the door on another. For Ja'Quan Owens, the door just opened again. For Otis Reese IV, that door just closed. And for Bills Mafia, the bigger question is what Buffalo does next. Because if linebacker really is one of the thinner positions on this defense, the front office can't simply hope everything works itself out. Maybe the answer is already on the roster. Maybe somebody like Ja'Quan Owens surprises us. Maybe another young linebacker emerges. Or maybe the Bills look outside the building for help. That's what makes the next few weeks so important. We're going to learn a lot about this team. And personally, I don't think we should judge any of these moves in isolation. The Bills are trying to build a roster that can survive a long NFL season and ultimately compete for the Super Bowl. That's the standard. That's the pressure. And that's exactly why every one of these roster battles matters. So Bills Mafia, when I look at these moves, I see a team still searching for answers. I see a franchise giving Ja'Quan Owens another opportunity because they clearly believe there's something worth developing there. I see Buffalo moving on from Otis Reese IV because they weren't convinced he was the right fit for this roster right now. And I see a linebacker position that could still deserve our attention, especially with Matt Milano no longer in the picture, and Tyrel Dodson's name potentially entering the conversation. Nothing is settled yet. And honestly, that's what makes this part of the year so exciting. We're close enough to the real games that every decision starts feeling important, but there's still enough time for somebody to completely change the conversation. That's what I'm hoping happens. I want somebody to step up. I want this roster to surprise us. And more than anything, I want the Bills to look back at these preseason decisions months from now and know they made the right calls. Because Bills Mafia has waited long enough. We don't just want another season with high expectations. We want to see this team take that final step. We want January football to mean something. We want February football to mean everything. And eventually, we want that Super Bowl. So let me know what you think, Bills Mafia. Do you like the decision to bring Ja'Quan Owens back after 4 other teams worked him out? Do you think he has a real shot to make the final roster? And what do you think Buffalo should do about the linebacker position after releasing Otis Reese IV? Would you be interested in seeing the Bills make a move for Tyrel Dodson? I want to hear what you think, because this is Bills Nation Update, and this channel is still just getting started. If you're one of the people who truly believes in the future of this team, if you believe the Bills can finally get to the Super Bowl, then subscribe and help us build this community toward our first 5,000 subscribers. Hit the like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and let's keep talking Bills football together. Bills Mafia from the beginning. Let's see where this team takes us. And hopefully, when this season is over, we're still talking about the Bills, but we're talking about them with a Lombardi trophy in sight.